Got my tea, so now I can spill the tea. Get it? So in this video, I'm going to be sharing my struggles of working at my last job. However, this video is going to be different in the sense that, unfortunately, due to things that were signed, I cannot say what company it was that I worked for. But that doesn't stop me from being able to detail the horrors that I experienced while I was working there, as I normally do for this Chronicle series, whatever the hell this is turning out to be. So the funny thing about this job is I actually interviewed for this job before. In the past, I was going for a different position. They didn't want to pay the hourly that I was looking for, so unfortunately it wasn't a good fit. But then I kept checking at the time because I was, as usual, not in a happy situation with my job, and I'd finally seen their name again. Only this time it was for a cafe manager position, and the salary was a really good salary that I had never made before. So I thought, screw it, let's see if I can go for this. The interview process was pretty simple. I came in, I had one interview with one person, and then I had came in for a second interview, and I had sat down with two people at that point. And one of them was the corporate chef, who pretty much told me the whole style of what they sell as far as their foods and what kind of cafe they're trying to be. He ended up really being impressed by the fact that I was a vegan, so I knew a lot of the vegan substitutes that he's tried to implement for the vegan customers. So it seemed like a perfect fit, and I went ahead and got hired. When I first started my training, I actually got pretty good amount of training. He trained me himself. He trained me for about 2 weeks, maybe going into 3 weeks, and then went ahead and went back to the other store that they had. And that was his main store, but if I ever needed him, I could always call him, text him, whatever, and he would always come over and help me. I will say probably the best thing about that experience was having him as a person to be able to talk to and vent to, and he really did give me a lot of guidance and help me, and so that was really nice to have. Next thing I want to talk about is the employees. One of the hardest things to find in food service is good people. People that are passionate about what they do. And I think it has to do with the fact that food obviously is very easy to get into. It's an entry-level job. Anybody can get it. And so usually who you're working with is a bunch of teenagers. This is their first job. They don't really care about food, but their parent wanted them to have a job, or they wanted to get a job to be able to pay for college, or everyone has their own story. I wouldn't go as far as to say that you'll never find it, because I think it also depends on the company. A lot of these companies don't pay enough, or their culture is, they preach a certain culture, but the culture actually doesn't exist, or like the store manager that's put in place does a horrible job at cultivating that culture. So there's a lot of things that can impact the kind of employees that you have to work in a certain establishment. And I had gotten employees that were very, very, some of them were senior, like ranging as far as like some of them had been there for 6 years, 7 years, 14 years. They had been very sour and very felt very neglected from the higher ups. So this had created a very big gap between the higher ups and them, and it affected their overall performance at work. They also suffered from having a really bad manager before me. In her own words, was considered a mean girl, and she would do lots of really shitty stuff. Like, one of the things she would do to one of the guys was he would give her a certain day off that he needed, and she'd act like she never got it, the paper, and like his paper that he did, and then she'd go ahead and give herself that day off so that he had no choice but to work that day. One of the other things one of the girls told me that she did was she would threaten her, like she would threaten to like fire her if she didn't do little things like making a wrap the right way, or just not listening to her over little things, just constantly giving her like a sense of she could lose her job at any point in time. So that was another thing that was kind of one of the struggles that I had to deal with this staff, was to try and basically put them in a safer state of mind and try to change their perspective of what a manager can be and should be. There was a lot of problems with the cafe when I first started, one of the biggest problems, or I should say opportunities, was the level of cleanliness. This cafe had been very neglected, and the previous manager was not on top of making sure that there was a cleaning schedule. So a lot of things just had to like gunk up. Daily things that should have been done in a kitchen were not getting done. Fridges not being cleaned regularly when they should be. Floors not getting cleaned. Behind the oven, the actual oven, appliances. A lot of the appliances also were barely getting by. Lots of appliances were kind of falling apart. Lots of things had rust on them that shouldn't have had rust on them, and just generally not kept well. They have a senior cook. He's been there for about 14 years, and he's an interesting person. I have to say, when I first met him, I'm gonna be very honest, I immediately wanted to get rid of him because he came off very, very abrasive, very rude, super hot-headed. You'd say one thing and he'd flip off the handle, couldn't handle criticism. You'd ask him a simple question about something he made, and I mean, he would lose his fucking shit. This was somebody that I just couldn't. I try, anytime I meet someone as a manager, when I go in and I meet a new employee, I always try to understand this employee's perspective and what it is that they need in order to succeed in their job. When I find an employee that I cannot do that for, it's tough, but then it also comes to the point in saying that there's only so much I can do. If an employee is unwilling to change their behavior after you've done the steps that you can take to make their job easier and to help open up a level of communication with them, then at some point you have to realize that there's nothing else you can do. And with this particular individual, I felt like he was pretty much vested into the way that he was, and he had never been ever corrected. There was nothing I could have done that would have made this individual change the way that he was doing things. Problem with that was because it was becoming a food safety issue, in the sense that he was doing things that he had been told several times he wasn't supposed to do, but he'd still do it, and no one ever put him in his place for it. I mean, little things like just not dating things that he had cooked, or anything that he put in the fridge he wouldn't date. He'd hold on to a lot of things that he should have gotten rid of and would still try to use it. He'd use things that were expired. He'd make recipes that were not by the book. He would just pretty much make it however he wanted to make it, and then if he had extra ingredients, he would just throw it in there, and then he wouldn't tell us. So I was unable to make the proper tags, which, if anyone who works in food service or just in general should know, that's bad, that the tag has to reflect what's in the food in the case of anyone having an allergy or just not liking something. So that was one of the biggest struggles that I had in that job, and it really took a toll mentally on me because I take food safety very seriously, and to be put in a position where I just didn't know what to do, how to fix the problem. Because I know a lot of people will just say, well, why did you just get him fired? Well, like I said before, he was a senior individual, and I had made attempts when I first started to rectify the problem. However, the higher-ups were against it because he had been there for so long. I don't really think they understood the gravity of the situation and how bad it was. And I think because they were so conditioned, like, he'd been doing it for so long, so many years, and I guess they figured, well, he hasn't killed anyone yet, so I guess in their head it was okay. Well, I had found prior documentation and evaluations on this guy that prior managers had made, and no steps had been taken to get rid of him. So I just didn't, what was I gonna do? Like, the only other thing I could have done was just walk out. And to be honest, I probably should have at that point, because at the end of the day, if someone gets sick or worse, whose fault is it? Mine. It doesn't even matter who did it. It's my fault at the end of the day because I'm the manager. And it was hard for me to know that every day, and to go in there every day and be scared every fucking day that he was going to potentially kill, or just make somebody really sick. I had a prep cook, really sweet guy, super hard worker, but he just wasn't as fast as he should be. He was also a seniored individual, and when I say seniored, I mean like old. Lot slower than he should be, and he just didn't move at the level that we needed him to. And he would also sometimes run over the clock a lot, because he would kind of get lost in doing like one or two tasks. He just didn't move as fast. He didn't get as much done, but he was a super nice guy. And here's the thing, it was weird because he'd be super reliable most of the time, but then he'd have a few instances here and there where he would just call out for like 2-3 days, or he'd be late, super late, like an hour to 2 hours late. Some of the excuses I get as a manager, it's crazy to me that people tell me that and they're just like okay with it. They don't second guess themselves and think, that's not really an appropriate answer. Let me not tell my boss that. No, I've gotten really stupid excuses for why someone's been late, and it's crazy to me. But basically, yeah, he would give me a pretty shitty, stupid excuse. And you know, unfortunately in this job, I really didn't have much options. That was another one of the issues I faced as a manager, was I was constantly looking, I was constantly shorthanded, but I couldn't get anyone to want to work there. The pay was extremely low, lower than it should be. And the benefits weren't, the benefits weren't great enough. People are motivated by pay. No one really fucking cares about benefits. You don't start caring about benefits until you're like 30 years old, because that's when you mostly need them. But as a young person, you don't really care about benefits or 401k. What you're looking for is money. That's usually your main motivator. And to be honest, right now, the economy and the way things are, that's kind of everyone's motivation. So working for a corporation that cannot shell out the money that people need to survive just created this horrible cycle of just getting just ghost interviews where I would make interviews with people, but they would never show up. So now we go to the meat of the problem. The very essence and reason that I pretty much no longer am there. There was a store manager and an assistant store manager, and they pretty much made my life a living hell. When I had gotten this job, I was told that this was a independent job. I controlled what went in it, what didn't go in it, the inventory, everything. Decisions, all decisions, me. I could add, I could subtract, anything, right? It's my world. They're just swimming in it. What ended up happening was, little by little, I felt a lot of my control that I thought I had and had been told I had slowly slip away from me. And things started to get ordered without me knowing. They would rearrange my department without me knowing. They would take away things, not tell me. They would micromanage. They would stand from the sidelines while we were busy and not help, or they would stand from the sidelines and kind of like talk and mumble to themselves, and then bitch about little things about why the case hadn't been full or ready. And it became a very, very big stress to have to deal with. And then on top of that, one of the biggest issues I had was the store manager was an excessively cheap man. Super cheap. Also didn't really care about employees, didn't believe in caring about employees. So my method of how I treated my employees was not okay to him, and he'd constantly tell me I had to stop doing this, stop mothering them, stop giving them their request off that they wanted, and things like that. Or I'd ask for things that we needed in the store, things that broken down or whatever. I'd have to constantly show him it, let him inspect it. He'd need a reason why as to why we needed a new item, or it just became very, very, like, just too much. Things that should have been done weren't done. Like, one of the problems that I had were the vents in the kitchen, and just entirely in that department were covered in thick dust. And I had never been told that this was my responsibility. Usually it's not. Usually it'll be a janitorial thing, or someone would be trained to do it, but none of my employees had been trained to do it. And they were also really high vents, so it wasn't really easy to get to. But I had brought it to their attention probably when I first started. Nothing ever got done. Then I brought it to their attention again, and they had kind of made a side comment like, well, you can have somebody do it. And I was like, well, no one's trained how to do it. And he made a comment like, no one knows how to clean vents, you just wipe it off. And I said, well, no, there should be a job aid for it. Someone cleans it incorrectly and breaks it or puts it back the wrong way, or whatever, that becomes a second issue that we'd have to eventually fix. Not only that, but most of my staff, or probably all of my staff, didn't think they were getting paid adequately, so asking them to do any extra task was definitely out of the question. And to be honest, most of my staff, although I cared for them, there was only probably one person I could rely on to do that, and he already had his hands full. So there was like a Saturday that him and the assistant manager came in and cleaned them. But after they had done that, they wanted like super praise, and they wanted me to basically kiss their ass over doing this simple task that should have been done. Even the CFO / HR lady who shares an office with the store manager, we'll get to her in a second, she also kind of like made a comment to tell me, oh, you know, they came in Saturday and they cleaned it. Did you notice that? And I was like, yeah, I noticed it. Did you notice it was disgusting as fuck before? Or like, why did it take me saying something to clean them? Number one. Number two, like, why are you mad at me because they had to clean it? It's kind of childish. Like, it was just everything that I had asked to be done was always done with like resentment or anger. And then when it was done, they wanted like me to notice it and praise them and thank them and kiss their ass or whatever. And things like that made the job excessively harder. And they just kept butting in. Every single day I was having to deal with them and answer lots of questions for why I was doing things. And then it became to a point where I couldn't do anything without asking them. I would ask the assistant manager if I could do something, and she would just say, well, I have to run that by him first. I have to see first. And I was like, it's my department though. Why do I need to keep running things by you guys? Especially since you all told me this was my department and I could do whatever I wanted. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, obviously they have to be involved somehow. Yeah, absolutely. But every day to day, no. Most managers will just read a report. If there's anything excessive that he needs to be a part of, like a super big loss in financials or anything, yeah, that would require a lot of money, things like that, then absolutely. There was a lot of equipment that we needed, or like equipment would be broken and they wouldn't replace it. One of the vendors that I had was like paper products, and I was able to go ahead and order a mop. We needed a new mop for the store. The freaking mop bucket for the store was broken, so trying to pull the crank down to drain the mop head was pretty much, it was just, you had to strong arm it. It was just, and it wasn't adequately drying the mop, you know, like releasing the liquid. So I took it upon myself and I ordered a new mop bucket. This caused a lot of turmoil because the mop bucket that I ordered was $100, and apparently he claims he could have gotten it for like $50. Okay, no problem. We'll just send it back. I took the initiative because we needed it, and he knew we needed it because we had said something prior, and then all the other employees told me they had said something prior, but he never got it. And not only did I get yelled at, but then he wanted to penalize me and say, from now on, I need to see all of the orders you send before you send them. And I was like, bitch, what? I strive every day to do my job with as minimal supervision as possible so that, you know, other managers can do their job and not have to worry about me. And to constantly have a manager babysit me and want to take more and more like responsibility from me, double check my work like that, there's really no point in me being there at that point. Like, just fucking do it yourself if you really feel that way. If you cannot trust me or you want to penalize me for taking initiative to get something that we needed. Like, it wasn't a big deal. We could have easily just given that bucket back. And when I mentioned something like that, they were like, no, it wasn't that. It was just, we could have just gotten it for cheaper. Okay. Why are you acting like we can't just send it back, though? What's sad is I'm not going to be able to tell you guys the sheer amount of times this happened, because it wasn't the first time something like this happened. It was 9 months. I was there for almost a year, and it just got progressively worse. They would say things to me, and then when I would come back and reiterate it or say, well, you said, they would say, I don't remember saying that. That's not something I would say. When did we have that discussion? And so they would play mind games with you, where they would say they don't, not to the best of my recollection. I had to start writing notes and shit to be like, no, Rebecca, you did have this conversation with them. And he said this, and she said that, and what was the end result? And it was crazy. But it became that because they just kept denying and denying. And then the HR lady, who is supposed to be biased, by the way, would immediately take his side and defend him. And she thought that I was out to get him. She thought that I was just gunning for him. And she would never try to actually listen to what I was saying and to listen to the complaints that I had that were valid. And I'd give her ample amount of like evidence and things like that, and she'd still be like, well, you know, let's talk about it together and blah 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 blah. One of the processes that they had that I didn't agree with, thought was fucking stupid, was, once again, remember, this is my department. And as a manager, usually as a store manager, you are usually in control of hiring. Sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes the district manager will hire for the store manager, and it's weird and stupid. But in this particular job, I, as a department manager, I could set up interviews, but I had to have, there needed to be a 2-interview process. And so I couldn't have interviews alone. I had to have an interview with either one of them. And it made the whole process very long and excruciating. And once again, it just made me feel like I needed to wait on somebody else to do my job, which of course annoyed me. And usually the interviews weren't that bad. And, you know, they would come or whatever. However, one particular one caused a lot of trouble. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a backstory though, because that's the way that'll help you guys understand a little bit more. Anyways, so the store manager has a daughter who would come periodically on her breaks, like summer break, winter break, whatevs, and she would work in the bakery, which I also was in charge of, and they would work side by side sometimes. I didn't think that they cared if family worked with each other or spouses or whatever. Now, in a typical work setting, this would be a no-no, because this would be considered a conflict of interest. For those of you who don't know what a conflict of interest is, it is when two individuals who know each other, either related, dating, friends, roommates, whatever, work together. One cannot manage the other one. That is, it's just a rule. Most companies will not let you. Most companies will actually ask you as you're doing an application, they'll say, hey, do you know anybody that works for Family Dollar or whatever? And yes or no, whatever. They'll probably ask you for a name, and then yeah. I didn't think that this was an issue because, as I said before, she would work in the bakery, he would work beside her, and so I thought, okay. I lost my dishwasher, and I had a girl up front, a woman up front, who had a son who was looking for a job, and he had a hard time finding work. He was trying to find his first job, so I thought, a dishwasher would be a first great job for a young individual to get some training and blah blah blah, whatever, right? I said, go ahead and bring him in for an interview. Now, keep in mind, I'm usually very, very, very organized, very detailed. And because they had been so fucking crazy about me telling them things in advance and always giving them notice, even though they never fucking told me shit. Because communication, by the way, was the biggest problem in this whole fucking job. The entire store suffers from horrible communication. I was usually very good at texting and letting them know. However, when we had this discussion, she had asked me at 8 p.m. She texted me, hey, can my son come in for an interview? I said, sure, real quick, whatever. Obviously, because it was at 8 o'clock, one, I had to go to bed early because I opened. But two, it was late. So I was not going to text him because it's late. So I did not inform him that we had this interview. So the day comes, the next day, and she comes in or whatever. And we had another interview prior that we went ahead and got out the way. And then as he was leaving, I guess, to do whatever he was going to do, I said, oh, by the way, we have one more interview. I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to tell you. So he made a face, but had already told me he was annoyed by that, but I was like, whatever, right? I sit down, he sits down, and he notices that the woman is standing there or sitting to the side. And he looks at her and looks at the boy and then looks at me and says, like, what's their relation? And I said, oh, that's her son or whatever. And he just looks at me and goes, sorry, let me put my tea down first so I can like really give you a looks at me and goes, and I'm like, ¿por qué? Like, what's the issue? After he had already, because mind you, he had already said hi to this person. This person knew he was there. He got up, didn't say a word. He literally did what I just did. He shook his head, whatever, upset, got up, pushed his chair, put his chair back, and walked away. I took that as a, fuck you, not worth it. And even the woman who was there saw it and was like, she saw it. She took it some other way. And so did the other associate I had who saw him do that. She also thought, wow, he just walked out in the middle of an interview. That's pretty rude. This had been, I had already been having lots of issues with him at this point, and every time I tried to talk to him or somebody else about it, once again, I kept getting pushback and blah, 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 whatever. So I finally got frustrated, and I decided to write an email to the HR lady, financial officer, blah, blah, whatever. Remember the lady who sits at him with the desk or whatever, same office, her. I wrote a letter. This email was also sent to the other store manager of the other location, because she was like right under the owner, so she would handle, you know what I mean, like it's kind of like the regional manager or district manager or whatever. And then I also sent this email to the corporate chef, because at the time he was also a very big supporter of me and understood the trials and tribulations that I was dealing with. And so it was a very nice email. I just simply detailed how disappointed I was in his behavior. I detailed what he did, and I asked for guidance and how to handle the situation, because I didn't know what to do now, because he walked out in the middle of an interview and didn't have the interview. So I technically had a one-person interview, and I knew that that was not protocol. So I didn't know what to do. And by the way, this wasn't the first time that he walked out of an interview and broke protocol because he just didn't want to fucking do it. He would break the rules constantly whenever he didn't want to do something. And everyone just accepted it because he's a store manager. He'd been there for fucking years, right? After I wrote this email, I felt pretty good. I felt like I wrote the most professional email of my life. Next day comes, corporate chef's there, and says, hey, we need to talk. And I said, okay, is it regarding the email I sent? He says, well, yeah, of course. And I'm like, that's a snappy comeback. It's like, okay. So as I'm walking to the office, I get a sense that somehow I'm in trouble. And I didn't really know why, and I didn't understand, but I kept walking anyways. I get into the office, store manager, the HR lady, and the corporate chef now. And I had seen the store manager prior in the morning, and I had said good morning to him already. So obviously when I'm walking in the office, I'm not going to say good morning to someone twice, right? But I hadn't seen her that day. So I said good morning to her. And she immediately snaps back, doesn't say good morning, by the way, snaps back and says, "You can say good morning to him, because he's here too." And I said, "What?" She's like, "Are you going to say good morning to him? He's here too." And I said good morning to him this morning when I saw him. And she's like, "Oh, you saw him earlier and you said good morning?" I'm like, "Yeah. But if it makes you feel more comfortable, I can say good morning to him again, if that's what you'd like me to do, since you think I'm the fucking 5-year-old. So that already put me in a bad fucking mood. Because once again, it only solidifies that she's very biased, was already taking his side, and assumed that I hadn't said good morning to him because I didn't say good morning to him in front of her. We all sit down, and I basically got chewed out for my email. And basically the gist was that I was in the wrong because I didn't tell him. And I misunderstood his gesture. So when he shook his head and sighed and got up in the middle of an interview, or before the interview even started, didn't fucking matter. The person had already seen him and knew him. Got up, walked away, never came back. I misunderstood that. Now, fuck, maybe I did. And because I had seen him shake his head, I had associated that with displeasure. And so that's why he got up like a 5-year-old and walked away. Now, thankfully, the interviewee didn't see that. But if you were an interviewee and you saw that, hopefully that's a word because I said it like 5 times. If you had saw it, it kind of would have made you feel like, that's weird. He claims, are you ready? He claims that he felt the person's nervousness. And I made him fill out his application at the interview, which, when the fuck was I supposed to have him fill out his application? He didn't have the luxury of filling it out prior. I gave him as much time as I could. It's not my fault he wrote slow, whatever. But he felt his anxiousness and his nervousness while he was sitting there. And that's why he got up and excused himself, to make the interviewee feel more comfortable. You know what's the worst part about that? Those 2 dumbasses believed it. And I suddenly became the bad guy. In the blink of a fucking eye. Like, it was me. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wait, me? I'm the villain? Like, okay. Shit. Wow. And I couldn't say anything. I just stood there like flabbergasted that I was really getting yelled at. And I remember the HR lady, who's supposed to be biased, by the way, said about 3 times that I wasted everyone's time. I wasted all of our time. Wasted about an hour of everyone's time because of this. Because of my general concern. Because of a question I posed. And then, at the end, the corporate chef looks at me and goes, "Is there anything you'd like to say?" And I went, "No." "Okay." 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 And they all just like stared at me. I said, "It appears that no matter what I say, I'm in the wrong, or I misunderstand. So I have nothing to say besides okay." They didn't like that answer, by the way. They wanted me to elaborate on what I meant when I said that. Which only further made me like chuckle inside. Because I feel like it's such a corporate behavior. What are you talking about? What do you mean? And of course, that's what ended up happening. What are you talking about? What do you mean? Give us examples. We need examples. Oh, I've given ample examples. The best part of this whole thing is the store manager all of a sudden breaks out a fucking soap opera wig, going for that Grammy, that Golden Globe, and he might as well have been fucking doing the crocodile tears as well, and just goes, I just don't know what else I can do for you. I don't know why you seem to think that I'm not on your side. Is it because I'm not getting you everything you want? Is it because I'm not buying everything you want? I mean, these things take time. Maybe they're expensive. I'm doing the best that I can. All we were fucking missing was a fucking violin. We were missing that one person in the back just. And I said, yeah, okay, I'm gonna go. I just pretty much just dismissed it. Like, I didn't want to get into an argument. I didn't want to say anything because every fucking thing I said just continued to make me enemy number one. And they all thought that I really had it out for this guy. Like, they weren't listening. They just kept thinking, I'm the problem. Clearly I'm the problem. Clearly. Always. It's me. It won't ever be the higher ups. It's never management. How could it be? Why could it be, right? It's always us. I walked out of that meeting pretty much hating everybody. And pretty much thinking that I was going to get fired within like the next maybe 2 weeks or whatever, because now at this point I knew there had been a target on my back. Like, if I wasn't sure before, oh, I was sure now. I was so sure now. It just made me really uncomfortable because they just kept making it seem like I was the issue. Like, I was the one that had the animosity. I just wanted things to be fixed and done, and there was a lot of things that he wasn't doing and he needed to be held accountable. But that's not a thing. You're not supposed to do that there. So yeah, I was the enemy. Cult behavior of like how much they defended this guy. I've never worked in such a toxic environment where the higher up is protected so well. It made me sick to be there every day and see the level of immaturity, the level of unprofessionalism, just the like just the sheer don't give a fuck about the employees, and just, it was a lot for me. Like I said, I mean, I've worked for several jobs. Clearly most of you have, if you're keeping up with this journey, I've worked for several jobs, and I know I've said I've worked for shitty people, but I think these guys finally take the cake. I gotten to the top of the shit pile, and yeah, I really do mean that. And I always try to think, how did they become this way? I don't know, but it's not a healthy environment. And if your employees running out of the door isn't a good enough sign, then I don't know. They're blessed enough to have people who are very content with that job. Lesser of two evils, I guess. People who are just content. That's the only reason that place is still going. They had another assistant store manager. I mean, this girl would I think she probably cried every day that she worked there, if not every other day. And just the constant abuse that she'd get, and the constant bullying she'd get if she wanted to take a day off or anything like that. I mean, it was just, it's inhumane to behave that way, to treat someone that way. And it's just really fucking sad. So I had the pleasure, or maybe it was a displeasure, I don't know, but I ended up meeting the owner at some point, probably 2 months in. I guess he wanted to see if I'd stick, because, surprise, surprise, they had trouble keeping a manager there. I wonder why. After I had proved that I guess I was here for the long run, he finally decided to grace me with his presence. And he's this old man, super old. He spoke a lot, basically promised me a bunch of shit, said, sky's the limit, and blah, blah, blah. And I told him some of the issues I had, a lot of the issues that I wanted to fix in the cafe. He said money wasn't a problem. Whatever I need, write it down, send it to him, and he would take care of it. I said, okay, sounds great. When I had told this to the store manager and HR / financial whatever, oh no, he didn't mean that. No, you met a different person. No. He'll tell you that, but then he'll tell us to protect his money. So no, we're not gonna, no. We won't be able to get all those things. We'll get whatever we can, little things here and there, but no. Let's not work on that right now. Let's work on other things that need to be addressed. Okay. That list never got made, by the way. Never made that list that I needed. All the things that they needed to fix. Never got there. And that was the last time I saw the guy. He came into the store certain occasions. I was there, but he never took an interest in seeing me again. Never took an interest in talking to me again. And it was funny because he really stressed that the food portion of this company was the bread and butter. Super important to him. He wanted to expand and do things like that, but he didn't feel the need to come and talk to me and touch bases with me every time he went there. That's kind of odd, don't you think? I became very annoyed with that as well. And it also just made me feel like, nah, you're not really involved, and you're not as involved as it should be, because if you were, a lot of shit would not be happening. By the way, if you hear some extra noise in the background, my puppy is playing with her toy. So I don't know if you can hear it. She's munching on her little toy. She's very loud and very cute. Anyways, so yeah, that was the last I saw him. Never saw him again. One of the biggest issues too with this department was it was constantly bleeding money. Excessive. And there was nothing I could do to fix it. And I knew the things that had to be fixed, but because I didn't control them, there was no way I could fix it. Like, pricing hadn't been updated, so that was something I couldn't control, and it was affecting my bottom line like crazy. And a lot of food cost, waste, things like that. I never had the time to sit down and look at my food cost and be able to swap items out for cheaper items, and that also made things very hard to keep the money down. I also there was a lot of waste, and we tried to repurpose the waste, but then they would make strict rules on what I could and could not do, and that would eliminate a lot of the things that I could do with waste, which meant I had to throw most of it out. And I mean, it's a lot. So that became an issue too, and that was once again something I could not fix. And when I tried to come up with ways to fix it, it just fell on deaf ears. The holidays weren't bad. We did a Thanksgiving meal. It's weird to mention this, but one of the frustrations I had was the way that the holidays were done around here was just so fucking chaotic. And our lives could have been made easier if they had just listened to what I had in mind and things like that. Basically, we had a Thanksgiving meal that we would go ahead and put together, and we had to obviously pre-portion out the food and things like that, but we had no scale in the back of house for the kitchen. We had a scale up at the front, and we had a scale in bakery, but we didn't have a scale in the back of the kitchen, the most important place that a scale should be, especially for waste, things like that. To be able to run out there with a big bowl of mashed potatoes or whatever and try to portion this food out in front of customers was just weird. So I had asked, hey, can we get a scale that we can put in the back so we can properly do this much faster and we're out of the way of the customer doesn't see us, whatever. He brings me to a tower of scales and basically says, there you go, figure it out. Just take one from here, plug it in, figure it out. And I'm just like, okay, I'm not really equipped to do all that. So I had to go without it, and it just made things just, oh my god, 10 times harder. And like I said, we had to pull all these big portions of bowls out of food that we had and try to portion it out in front of customers, and then customers would of course bother us, and it made things a living fucking hell. Another annoying thing that I have to deal with is vendors. Now, most of my vendors were very great, wonderful communication, super supportive, blah blah blah, whatever, but a lot of them would be literally wouldn't respond to me fast enough. It would be days before they responded. They would mess up my order constantly. And one of the guys was he would do paper products, my paper products, Every single order. Every single order he'd mess up. And if he messed it up, that was it. He wouldn't come and fix it. Like, he wouldn't come the next day. You know what I mean? Like, he wouldn't come that day and be like, oh, I'm so sorry, and fix it. No. He'd make me wait until my next order, next week, to fix my problem. Sometimes, very rarely, he'd come the next day if he had a person who could deliver. But if not, he made me wait till next week to finish, to fix my problem. And he was horrible at communicating. I would ask him several times to confirm my order, wouldn't. I would ask him several times to tell me if he had something that I really needed, he wouldn't. And it was just the most obnoxious, like, oh my God, so frustrating. And I would complain about him constantly to the higher ups, and they would just tell me, well, you know, it's fine. He doesn't really mess up usually that bad. Or they would tell me to give my order to the other assistant in the other store so that he could give him his order because he had a better relationship with him. Why? Do I need to take him out for fucking cocktails just for him to get my order right? Like, no. At the end of the day, he is a vendor. He works for us. And we're expecting him to provide a certain service, and he's not. And I'm telling you, I'm having several issues with him, and you're just telling me, my light is dying up front, so this is why my face all of a sudden just looks dark as fuck. Like, this thing is horrible. Anyways. So, let's go ahead and wrap up this video, since clearly my light is telling me we're done. I wouldn't say it was the most stressful job I worked, but it was very unenjoyable. The level of abuse, like I said, that I witnessed, so many more issues that I unfortunately probably blocked out of my fucking head, the trauma, and just things like that. The customers were really shitty. We didn't have great customers that I could remember. Most of our customers were fucking entitled pieces of shits, and they would encourage that behavior, so that made it even worse. Overall, you know, I wish I could say I got something out of it. I guess I got experience, but honestly, I didn't grow as a manager the way I wanted to grow. That job really didn't teach me much. Pretty much frustrated me the fuck. The entire fucking 9 months. I met some really nice people that I don't even keep in touch with, most of them, so that's kind of sad too, because that also really kind of just makes me feel like, once again, I went through all that garbage for nothing. So yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments down below. Have you experienced any of the things that I mentioned? Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys on the next one. See ya.